Welcome back to the Preacher in the Hat podcast. This is episode number 2. My name is Derek Longenecker. Across from me is my brother Eric Longenecker, and also across from me is my father Steve Longenecker. We are the Preacher in the Hat crew. Behind the scenes, working for us is Mr. Chris Sumpter, flexing off cam.
Baby. Yeah, baby.
Unfortunately, off cam for those. We've got a couple good things, as some really, I think, a really interesting topic to get to, talking about some of God's promises and things like that. But before we do that, we're going to get started a little bit differently than we did in episode 1, just to kind of give, I guess, our audience here maybe some not insight, but I don't know, a little tell us about ourselves kind of thing with some of these things that we'll do at the beginning of each one. But this one, I kind of wanted to pose a question to the two of you, that I feel like everybody that I've ever asked this question has some sort of unique answer to it. And so to me, I feel like it's kind of telling, because you can always kind of, it just feels like there's always an interesting response. So I want to know from you guys, from the two of you first, talk about the worst job that you ever had. And Eric, I'm going to let you speak on this because our answers probably going to overlap.
Yeah. Go first, Eric. I want to hear yours.
Okay, so summer after high school, you remember Dad was real big on us having a job in summertime. I think that probably started right around when we were like, well, once we could drive to a job, like 16. He was big on us having a job in the summertime. And so this was between high school and college. And I guess I wanted to do something different. I don't really know how it came up, but thanks a lot to monster.com. I ended up someplace.
Shout out.
Yeah, shout out monster.com. Is that still a website? I don't even know. This place up on Green Springs Avenue in Birmingham, Alabama. This tall building. You get up to the top floor, and it's like that's what sells it. Like the view from the office and that kind of stuff. It's like, well, you spend like no time in that office building. It's an outside sales job, is what I ended up doing, and what it turned out to be was like they would drop you off. Like you would get in the car. I'm gonna let you expand on this too, but they would get you in the car. They would send you out with junk. Ultimately, we sold a few things that were like good, but like you were peddling stuff. Walking door to door, like business to business. It was the summertime. You had to wear a suit and tie.
Summertime in Alabama.
Yeah, summertime in Alabama, you had to wear a suit and tie, and you're like walking into a car dealership and like trying to talk to somebody who's going to buy this coupon book from you, and it just
selling to car salesmen, huh?
Right. Yeah, whatever. Anybody. Like they expected you to walk into restaurants, like whatever it was, like nothing was off limits. And that was easily the worst job that I had. Being because of all the circumstances of. 2, I also found out that I found out I wasn't really a good salesman, and so that you have to be a really, really good salesman to make that kind of sales job happen.
Yeah, was there like 1 or 2 guys that they held up as examples too?
Yeah.
Was there something like that about how much money you could make?
To be completely honest, there were people who crushed it.
Yeah.
For the most, but that was rare. The turnover was insane. The amount of people that they had coming in and out. You would have people come the first day and then they would never be heard from again because they'd get there, realize what it was, and be like, "I'm done." Gotcha. Like Eric was saying, it was in the summer. It's oppressively hot. You're walking. Everything is, and if you're not a pushy salesman, it's really hard to do because I remember like the worst place that I ever walked into that I didn't like. I was like, I don't want to do this. Was a funeral home.
Whoa.
Now there was not a funeral happening, right? But I'm like, can I speak with the director of the funeral? Like to try to sell. Funny story. He bought from me. Yeah, right.
I don't even
Like,
want to know what
I
he
know.
bought.
But going in, I'm like, man, I don't want to be here. I don't want to do this. But that guy, I do remember. I remember that
You
guy.
might be
He
a pretty
bought.
good salesman. You
I
can sell
don't
to a
know.
funeral
I mean, I think
director.
I want to say I had. I don't remember what I had that day.
I do remember both of you being miserable in the
It was
job.
horrible.
It was
I
awful.
remember that. How long did you last, Derek?
I really don't remember. I think it was less than a month. For me, I quit and started my own landscape business.
I remember that.
And that one actually stood the test of time for a while. Passed it on to my brother-in-law, and then he passed that business on as well again.
Yeah.
And so it did some good. It did some good stuff. But that was easily the worst I've ever had. It did, however, and you definitely remember this, led to the best prank that I've ever played in my entire life. I also got beat up mercilessly for it. By
Not
Derek,
physically.
By Derek. But, well, we had limits. We had ground rules. You couldn't punch. You could only really punch in the shoulders and like upper arms, and I'm sure they bruised well. But anyways, so best prank I ever played in my life, I would say so. Was See, I was thinking about this recently, and I for a long time thought that it was a couple. I submitted. So, okay, let me tell the story first. I submitted Derek's resume online, like again, after we had quit this job. And I, for a long time, I thought that it was like a couple years later that it wasn't, that it was, but I think it was actually like a few to several months, only a few to several months later that I submitted his
happened?
I submitted his resume. And I remember I was in our bedrooms at the house in Homewood.
Yeah.
And you were at the computer, and I heard your phone ring. You pick it up, and just as the nature of the conversation was going, I was like, "Oh snap!" They called him.
Just because,
And he comes running at me.
we talked. I talked to you about the turnover in that at that job. It goes to show you how bad it was that somebody who had worked there a few months before, they didn't even know. Like the girl
you
who
worked
called
there.
me up, no, they had no record that I had ever been employed by them or anything like that.
Wow. I didn't remember that part about the prank, I don't think. That's pretty cool, actually.
That came back to me as he was just talking about
Yeah,
that.
interesting.
Yeah, that was.
That's interesting.
So we spent a lot of time on that, but that is just kind of going to show you a little bit about what you'll learn about us. I want to make sure we
Mine
hear
seems a
your
little
answer.
mundane now.
Yeah.
Mine's a little mundane. I mean, I've got a few since I've had a few jobs in my time, and 13 years old in a watermelon patch, $1 a day in the middle of June in South Georgia sun.
There's a lot of bad jobs to be had in the South heat,
Really?
right?
Yeah,
in the southern heat.
Or maybe it was the sanitation engineer job I had my last 2 years of high school and first year of college, where sanitation engineer meant I cleaned up the bakery.
Was that? I was gonna say, is that a nice way of
IGA
calling you?
in
They
South
just didn't
Georgia.
want to call you a
I
janitor.
called myself
He
sanitation
has
engineer.
since
I was
changed the title.
self-appointed.
Yeah.
I changed the title.
What was it actually?
Washing dishes, scrubbing the floor, scraping up trash, taking out the trash.
No, but what was the title you got hired for? Do you
I
remember
don't
what they
remember.
called it?
I do not
Okay.
remember, but sanitation engineer is what I'm using.
Yeah, that's
my
fine.
story.
Hey.
That's what's on my resume.
I'm gonna guess they're not around to fight you on that
They're
anymore.
not. They're not the ones who hired me. That store is still in existence.
Is it? Okay. All right.
Yes,
Cool.
It still is. By a different name. Or we could go to the landscaping job I had with Eddie Hall Can Do It All in Tuscaloosa. My buddy there, who the Yard Kings we were called.
Oh yeah.
It's the hot of summer again. I'm weed eating. I'm blowing. I'm edging. I did all the edging. I did that. Worked on a crew several days a week. Hot. By this time, I was working on a master's degree. I had already been a chaplain in prison. I'd been a pastor. And frankly, I think I kind of thought the job, especially making $3.75 an hour in 1986, 85 and 86, seemed a little low to me. But I had a family of four of us. You guys weren't around yet. And but it was hot. And I remember I would be mowing grass, and these college students would be coming out of their apartments in Tuscaloosa. We did a lot of apartment complexes. We were the second largest lawn care service in Tuscaloosa at the time, so we were pretty far up the ladder. But they'd come out, and you could see they were looking at the yard help. You know, these young college students, rich white kids, are coming out looking at the yard help and I would think, they don't even know who I am, and I'd be so angry about it doing that. And so, but anyhow, I remember one time what was cool about this story is that one time I was complaining to God about having this job, and His words to me were, "You're not too good to do this. You're not too good to mow grass." And I think that was a very wise comment by Him.
Yeah.
It was pertinent. Who am I to say He makes wise comments, because He does it all the time? But that was very helpful. But that probably was a job that I was looking forward to moving on from.
Yeah, I hear that.
Among others.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, okay, so we wanted to kind of jump into, Derek mentioned at the start something that's kind of talks about God's promises.
Yeah.
There's a story behind this particular song. It's not a hymn. I think Derek and I were talking about it one time. Sometime in our preparation, that it may appear in like some hymn books. I don't think it does in the traditional ones necessarily.
Yeah,
but,
probably not.
anyways, it's written back in like 1857 by Dr. William Pitts. And it's called "The Church in the Wildwood." So the story, which I did not find out until recently, was that he was traveling through Iowa. And he stopped in a place called Bradford, Iowa, which is still there today. He's going to visit his fiance. Stops in Bradford, Iowa. Takes just some time to relax, and is down in like this kind of valley sort of area, from what I understand. And God gives him this vision of a brown church, just out in front of him. As he was sitting there, just in the complete, not wilderness, but just nature. And the story goes that it just really stuck with him, and he basically says that he went home, wrote a song about it, just to like appease,
get it off.
Get it off his mind, to like settle it.
Yeah.
And so he wrote the song and just kind of like shelved it, like kept it in the back pocket. It wasn't like this thing where it's like, oh, this is a great idea for a song, let me see how I can get it out there, and that sort of thing. But he kept it, and then 5 years later, he and his fiance, who's now his wife, are traveling through Bradford, Iowa, and in the spot where he had stopped, he's passing through, and they're building a church in the exact spot where he had envisioned it, and they're painting it brown. One of the reasons they go with brown paint is because apparently at that time that was one that was most readily available. It was cheap. It was cheap. I don't know, all that kind of stuff. But there was that little brown church in the Vale, and so which the lyrics to the song call it that, the little brown church in the Vale. So it's strange because I'm not really, it's not my kind of music that I've always listened to, but I have loved the song since I was a little kid. And the reason being is because I first heard it on the Andy Griffith Show. So,
that great musical score.
They did.
They really did.
I was gonna say,
they did some bangers.
I love that.
Yeah, I was gonna say, you throw the Darling Family coming in there. They would tear it up.
I know. And who was the band?
Bobby Fleet.
Jim?
No, Bobby
Fleet, but that wasn't a real band. What was the guys that
I see
were
what
pickers?
you're
Was that? Yeah, I guess that was the Darling Family. And they had the one guy that would occasionally sing, and that they were like a real band.
Yeah,
they could pick it like crazy. Anyways, this wasn't their song, but they perform it like it's this really cool scene. You know how the Andy Griffith Show could just like they could cut from comedy to serious back to whatever, just like as quickly as they wanted to, and they just made it work. And there's this guy traveling through the town, and his car breaks down. It's a Sunday, and he's demanding some help. He's got to get back to where he's from on business the next day,
probably Raleigh
and all this stuff. Malcolm Tucker, and he's got to get going, but he can't find any help, and so of course he's with Andy and Barney later in the afternoon, and they're at Andy's house out on the front porch. Malcolm was inside trying to get use of the phone line that's available in the town. These old ladies hog it for hours on end on Sundays afternoon. Apparently, that's the story. And he picks it up. He's listening
to.
Call
that a party line, my brother.
Okay,
it was a party line.
Gotcha. Yeah. So he picks it up. He hears them talking. He's frustrated. He comes out to the front porch and Andy's got the guitar out. He did it in a whole bunch of episodes, and he's picking on the song at the church in the Wildwood. And they start kind of humming it in the background, and then it's just like this slow shot that takes forever to zoom in on Malcolm Tucker's face as he's just relaxing as he hears the song or whatever, and then he just starts singing it with them at the very end. Just a great shot and super cool. And so I've always that has always stuck in my brain about this song, and so it got me thinking about why he wrote the song, and he didn't even know that it was going to be a vision that God gave him, that eventually came to pass. And that kind of got me thinking about a similar thing that happened to you. I don't know if it's probably been 40 years since that happened.
82.
So
1982.
Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah. Sometimes and this was true back then in 82 when this happened to me, is sometimes I don't always know if it was God's promise or just a good idea. So sometimes I wouldn't know there's a God idea or a good idea. But so I'm driving from South Alabama, where I lived, and was preaching and working in prison as a chaplain. I'm riding up through Birmingham, Alabama on Interstate 65, headed up to Straight Mountain, which is above Springville, Alabama, way up in the mountains. And I'm going to be there for several days at a church there that people I knew. While riding through Birmingham, a strange thing happened to me. It had never happened to me before anywhere else I had ever been or anything. But as I rode through Birmingham, and I don't remember exactly on 65 where I was, but it was in Birmingham, either from, maybe exit 252 all the way up to 260 something now, somewhere in that area. I had this strong sense that I heard God say, not audibly but loudly, in my head, is I want 10 more churches in Birmingham, Alabama. Well, those of you who know Birmingham, and I didn't know Birmingham much at all then. I mean, I grew up in Georgia, so Atlanta was our big city, not Birmingham and that kind of thing. So, I don't really know anything about Birmingham to say. Now, we know there's a lot of churches in Birmingham, so if I had done my research, it'd probably been like, why Birmingham, But that was the thought that was there. It germinated in my mind a little bit, but not long. I didn't really keep it too much longer. And then, but I had a sense that I was supposed to leave Atmore at some point and plant a church somewhere. So one of the first places, that was some years later, about a year and a half, 2 years later. And we thought about Birmingham, came to Birmingham, it didn't seem right, so we ended up in Tuscaloosa. While we were in Tuscaloosa, somebody else started a movement of churches we were associated with where they were planting new churches here in Birmingham. I'm thinking, oh, well, that's kind of interesting. There was five different ministries that were starting churches in Birmingham. I thought, well, that maybe was God, but I'm just not supposed to be a part of it. Yeah. You know what I'm saying? Directly, because I'm over in Tuscaloosa. I'm not in Birmingham. So I kind of let it like that. And then so up through the 80s, they started in 86 and 87, 88, 89. 87, we moved to Birmingham because we closed a church that we had started in Birmingham. Right. I mean, in Tuscaloosa, I'm sorry. Yeah. That was when I had my job, too, by the way.
That's how we made the connection.
You made the connection. I'm planting a church and mowing grass. But anyhow, And I'm really good at church planting because I can start and close a church in 3 years flat.
Is that
you know
how
what
you
I'm
know- is
saying?
that
I'm
the
really good.
efficiency?
I'm really good. That's some sort of record.
Efficiency metrics.
Yeah,
are
very
high.
efficiency.
Yeah.
Very efficient. I've had other friends that took them all the way to 5 years to close the church they started, but it only took me 3. But anyhow, having said that, we ended up in Birmingham, so here we are right in the middle now, and so we're at a church that's a part of this planting churches, right? And then in 1990, I was asked if I would become the leader of that movement here in the Birmingham area. I was asked to do that in 1990, October of 1990. I started.
The year of our Lord.
The year of our Lord, 1990. Yeah, that's correct. And it's the year of our Lord because it's the same year you fine gentlemen
Exactly,
came to
that's what I
visit
meant.
us, and cosmically speaking. So here you are, and in 1990. But when I was commissioned to do that, you guys were 6 months old. It was October of 1990. You were born in April of 1990. So here we go, and I've been at it ever since.
I was saying the rest is history, and we'll probably squeeze in a few stories over time, over
Yeah.
the coming episodes about what has happened between 1990
That's
and
right.
and today. Just a few.
And I look back on it now. It was a God idea, not a good idea, not just a good idea.
Yeah, I was gonna say it still was a good
It
idea.
was a good idea, but it was a
definitely
God
a good
idea.
Yeah. Could you? So the vision was for 10 churches. Are you able to like put a number on what you think that's been?
The number is 15 plus.
Okay.
Now, all of those ministries have not continued because a few of them were as good as I was. They could stop and start them.
sure.
You know what I'm saying? And so there's not 15 that I can point to that's there, but there's 11 now that I can point to
Yeah.
That still remain.
that still remain.
Okay.
Yes,
Okay.
Yeah. And then so it continues, and we're continuing to plant churches. Now it's a continued thing. It's not going on.
Ongoing.
It's ongoing.
Yeah,
It's not something
right.
that's stopped. It's not historical. There's a historical start to it, but it's not completely in the history books. It's our ongoing history right now.
Yeah. That's pretty cool. It's interesting. The story that I had, of course, is certainly not as I don't know. That just feels kind of like groundbreaking. To think about all the things that one thing set up. But I had this strong sense when right before I started dating my wife Michaela, and it was probably in we started dating later into the springtime, and it was probably like towards the end of January or so, something like that. I don't know, maybe more into February. It doesn't matter. Where I just had this strong sense, like even though like we weren't even dating, and that that was who I was gonna marry. It just felt like God was like, I had been through different things in the past, and made enough bad decisions, not really consulting God about some prior relationships and that sort of thing, and that it was just almost kind of like this. He was like, just like enough is enough, like here's where you need to turn your attention, and that was really cool. But it's like I can't even I couldn't even get to that point if if you didn't eventually come to Birmingham, kind of as God had showed you. It's like kind of open up the doors for and that just one small thing that he did all on top of that stuff is very, very cool. Derek, did you have a story to share about?
Yeah,
how
I mean,
God's done that?
probably more than one, but the one that immediately kind of came to my mind was back in, I guess it would have been 2018. My wife and I had been trying to get pregnant for a while, and it hadn't been happening, and so we're praying about that, and I remember one day she kind of came up to me and I don't remember exactly how she said it, but she asked me if I liked the name that, she felt like God had given her to name our son. And I was like, oh man, I immediately knew. I was like, yeah, that's absolutely it. And you think at that point, this kind of goes back to, to the original story about the church or whatever. Like, I thought that meant the very next, like we were going to get pregnant then, like that next, and it didn't happen again and again. And it wasn't that long ago. It wasn't that long then. I think it was maybe a few more months before we finally were. But I remember when I found out, or after I found out, because we celebrated for a little while when we finally found out that we were pregnant, because it took us a long time. But I remember thinking like, man, this has got to be a boy, because of, we had that name. And we had one of those apps on your phone where like it would pop up a kid's name or something like that. And you would say like, oh, I like it, or oh, I don't. And then it would log the ones that you liked. And then you could connect it. Like I could connect it to her account or something like that. And then it would let you know if you ever like both liked the same name. And so
we were kind of horrible. Me and Michaela were horrible at that.
But I didn't really commit that much to doing, because we're like, oh, if it's a girl, we need to know, like we need to have a name or whatever. Like I just wasn't really that committed to any of them. And I think I went through it. It showed you like statistics, and I went over through probably like, I'm not kidding, I think 2,500 names.
Oh my goodness.
And I maybe liked 15 to 20. Because it was, to me, it was like such a foregone conclusion that it was going to be a boy and what we were going to name him. And we never settled on a girl's name. And I just remember going into the appointment where we were going to find out, and, the radiology tech or whatever who's doing the ultrasound, it's like you're sitting there in a dark room, and I'm just sitting over there against the wall, and like really, really nervous, but not. I don't even know how to describe that, because it was almost just like, I'm like, in my mind, I couldn't fathom.
Right.
I couldn't fathom it not being a boy.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? Like, because it felt so settled that that's what it was going to be. And I remember looking up at the ultrasound, and I don't have a clue what's going on. Like, my wife Catherine, she's like talking to her, and then they're talking all this stuff, and I'm like, I have no clue what I'm looking at.
There's a blob on the screen.
Yeah,
boy, girl.
Exactly. But and they're talking about it, and she's like, and I think we know what it is, and I'm like, oh man, is it a girl? Like, because and she was like, it's a boy. And I was like, oh, yeah, okay, all right. So, but I remember seeing like the look over Catherine's face, and just like how happy and almost not relief. Like what would be, I can't even think of like what the right word would be, just knowing that like, yes, this was the promise. Like this was what he said, like this was what he said, and he did it. And it was like you're in a hospital physician's plaza or whatever with someone else in the room, and you're your wife, but it's like a holy moment of God just delivered on this promise. And there was a whole lot more after that God still had to deliver on, and I'm sure we can spend some time on that.
That'd be good
down the road. But like being in and that moment of promise fulfillment, like there's not many feelings.
There's not
like that.
Yeah.
What I love about that discussion, Derek, is you're recognizing how that was connected to what God told you. A lot of people never, when they get to the point like you're sitting in there and see this happen, a lot of people don't make that connection.
Yeah.
I think. But I love that you're making that connection.
Yeah, I mean, you're sitting there like, how it would be kind of normal, I guess, in that moment to like cry like a little baby, but you're thinking like, how am I not gonna sit here and like, because he just like he just did it. He just did what he said he was gonna do.
That's right.
It's
Beautiful.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's like me being in the rain, right? The story of me being in the rain at a phone booth. Remember that?
Oh yeah. Okay. Yes.
When you found
wearing a
out
suit.
Yeah.
When your mom, I was in Mobile traveling with my work with Prison Fellowship, and I called because she had a doctor's appointment, and it was at 21 weeks, and we were going to find out. We knew we had twins, but we didn't know if we had boys or girls. Remember, God told me it's okay to want a boy, and the next thing I know, a week later, we now know.
He's like, "How about two?"
Here comes two. And at 21 weeks, I'm at a phone booth. It's raining. I'm in a suit and a tie on. And that's the only way we could do it. No cell phones. And I call and she says, "They're both boys."
Oh man.
Same moment that you had.
Yeah.
Same moment you had. Standing there. I was beside myself driving all the way home from Mobile. In my little Honda Civic hatchback, buddy. I was having a ball.
That's a good drive, though.
Because he did the same thing to me that you're talking about. And that was, he did it.
Yeah.
He did it. He didn't have to do it.
Yeah.
He did it. He did it.
That's awesome. I just love the way, Derek, you kind of mentioned there's nothing quite like God delivering on something like that.
Right.
You know, there's
You like try to put yourself in the picture of this guy walking back, or I don't know,
exactly.
riding back. I don't know,
Exactly.
behind horse, and he's like, hey, he's probably like telling his wife like, this is where I had,
Right.
I'm pretty sure like it's coming up here, all this stuff or whatever, and you get there and he's like, wait. What?
They built to build
like,
it.
Yeah. It's like, oh, you remember that song that I wrote? Blah, 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 blah. Like, and then you come up on it and it's like, it's there. You're like, that's got to be, it had to be
and
surreal.
then they played the song, or they sang, he taught the song,
Oh, really?
I believe, and a choir. He was
Whoa.
he was teaching for a choir somewhere around the area, and they sang it at the church's like dedication, or whatever it was, their first thing. So cool. They sang that song. Like, I even think about like that, like standing inside it, and what happened. I think the church eventually. You talk about closing churches. The church, I think, eventually closed. But it opened up again. It restored. You can still go see it today, and it's. I think they call it the Little Brown Church. I think it's just kind of what it's affectionately known.
All this talk's giving me a hankering, like we used to say in South Georgia, a hankering to sing it. We're gonna sing it. We're gonna sing it here. We got a hankering to sing it.
We're gonna sing it for you here in just a second. And don't be surprised, Derek, if in the next year or two, Dad's talking about a trip he's making to Bradford, Iowa. So.
I know, just to go see that place we talked about on episode 2.
Sounds very much like something he might do.
We'll do an on-site podcast. We'll take Chris Sumpter with us.
And this may be a little bit of an inside joke, but he can only go to Bradford, Iowa, if there's a seedy barbecue restaurant that he can eat at,
or buffet.
Or buffet.
It's got to be a questionable looking buffet.
A questionable establishment.
Oh, that's another story for another day. It's got to say Kenny's at the top, right?
See, we're deep into the inside jokes now.
Yes, we are.
Let's whip out a guitar and sing "The Church in the Wildwood," and we'll close on that note. So for Derek and Steve and Chris, I'm Eric. This has been the Preacher in the Hat, and this is "The Church in the Wildwood."
There's a church in the valley by the Wildwood, no lovelier spot in the dale. No place is so dear to my childhood as the little brown church in the vale. Oh, come, 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 come to the church in the Wildwood, Oh, come to the church in the dale. No spot is so dear to my childhood as the little brown church in the vale. How sweet on a clear Sabbath morning to listen to the clear ringing bell. Its tones so sweetly are calling, oh, come to the church in the dale. Oh, come, 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 come to the church in the Wildwood. Oh, come to the church in the dale. No spot is so dear to my childhood as the little brown church in the vale. From the church in the valley by the Wildwood, when day fades away into night, I would fain from this spot of my childhood wing my way to the mansions of light. Oh, come, 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 come to the church in the Wildwood. Oh, come to the church in the dale. No spot is so dear to my childhood as the little brown church in the vale. No place is so dear to my childhood as the little brown church in the vale.